So this is a question that I think is asked by a vast majority of the horse world really, which is, why is it so hard to ride my horse on the bit? And many of the people who think it is easy and don't have that question would be covering that very grey area of what on the bit really means, and my version and their version may not be the same. So there are folks out there thinking it's easy, to whom I would say, well, actually you're not doing it. This isn't quite it. But for a lot of folks it is hard, and there's a massive amount of skill that is presupposed if a trainer or a coach says to you, just get the horse on the bit. So what has to be true for getting the horse on the bit to begin to become doable and easy? What has to be true is that you're really good at supporting your own body weight, because if you go kerplonk like this is normally round back riders, you plonk your weight down in the saddle, you will tend to squash the horse in the middle, his back gets hollow, his tummy gets longer, his neck gets longer, and up in the air goes his head. So being able to support your own body weight and sit almost as if you were suspended in a harness like this, rather than going, be my armchair, hold me up. The difference in how the horse perceives you as a burden and the difference in the influence you have on him in those two cases is huge. It can go wrong the opposite way too, because we can have the rider who's kind of going, "Whoa," and is hollow-backed and really doesn't breathe very much and is way up here, and she can't make enough contact with the horse to have an impact on him. And what tends to happen is, if her body is long in the front like this, short in the back, she's kind of implicitly allowing him to do the same, with his abs longer and his back hollow. So both of those riders from totally opposite ends of the spectrum have to get themselves to neutral in a martial arts stance, their body, their torso just stacked up and vertical, supporting their own body weight in shoulder, hip, heel. Once they can do that and start to sit more still, that will be one of the next things, because when you're shoving, when you're wiggling, when you're jiggling, when you're fiddling, all that stuff is like noise on a radio that isn't well tuned. And we're trying to take that out and just get to a background level of you quietly being there and then able to match the forces of the horse's movement. So here comes the next thing. If he is pushing back at you with his head and neck coming up this way, folks who ride the horse in carriage really well are from their core, from their centre, creating a load of pressure in their insides and actually creating a forward force. They're doing the same thing you do if you clear your throat. They're going like and that creates a push from their tummy that gets to push the horse's head and neck away from them. So there's something rather magical happening in the way the rider doesn't just line up her body and support her body weight, but actually then begins to use the power of her core to generate this forward force to begin to push the horse's head and neck away from her. And it's not wiggling, it's not jiggling, it's not shoving, it happens in stillness, in quietness, and of course what happens when it happens really well is it just looks like magic. So many of the riders who can ride the horse in carriage so well, and who literally do make it look like magic, may have no clue of what it is they're really doing. It's almost like they've gone, here's my chocolate cake, and you go, so what's the recipe? And they go, oh, I don't know, I just bake it. And my auntie made the most wonderful chocolate cakes with no recipe, and you had to kind of pin her down and weigh the ingredients to go backwards to find out what the recipe is. And really, you need a recipe. It's not enough to just be able to, for somebody to just say to you, make chocolate cake, without giving you the recipe. And once we break this down in the how of riding, we're breaking it down into what are the ingredients in this recipe? How do you put them in the pot? How do you mix them together? How do you make it happen? How do you bake the cake? How do you get your cake to rise? And some people just implicitly know those ingredients and can't tell you in words. And what we've got here is words to say it, riders to demonstrate it, stages to go through, a cake to bake, and hopefully a cake that's really going to rise.